So guys, welcome back. It's week number 10 and you are here with me, Owen aka The Bear. We have Sean aka The Handsome Stranger and Aidan, the face for radio, over in the corner. And this week we have Thomas Anthony Carlin, the very first serving police officer in the PSNI to arrest a judge in active court. There's a story there on its own.
Let's jump right in.
Let's get in.
Yeah. So Anthony?
Yes.
Yeah. So Anthony, tell us a wee bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you're from, and how did you end up being in the police service, and then we'll go into this story.
Basically, I grew up in Ballymena in the housing estate, single parent family. Grew up normal childhood, running about, bikes, out running all the time and everything else. Up through school, got enough GCSEs and stuff like that to become an electrician. Served my time as an electrician. Sort of at the age of 21, I became a qualified electrician, a qualified soldier, and I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu. So all the things I've been training for them 4 or 5 years. So there was actually Tony Blair at that stage. He was looking to enter just the TA. I went to the TA as a part-time thing, just for a bit of crack, bit of money, and going experience and shooting guns and stuff. And Tony Blair, he wanted to use the TA in peace times. So they wanted to use the TA and along with the regular army. So there's a platoon of us went to the Falklands.
Sorry, Anthony, just for the younger ones watching, the Territorial Army was a part-time regiment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was.
I think it's still going. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a part-time thing, and the whole basis of it was that if you were in the TA, if a war broke out, you would just go into your normal 9 to 5 or fireman or whatever it was. And if war broke out, the full-time soldiers went off to war and the TA filled in their positions at home. They were never used and sent off to battle and stuff. So that Tony Blair wanted to get these additional resources and see could they be used full-time. So there was a platoon of us went to the Falkland Islands for 6 months or for 4 months. And that was my first time ever travelling, because I remember sitting in school looking out the window going, there has to be more to life than the troubles in Northern Ireland, the news every night about police officers and soldiers being killed, all that sort of stuff there. And I wanted to just go and travel and see the world and everything else. So this was my opportunity to be essentially babysat, go to the far side of the world, jump out of helicopters, fire bazookas, machine guns, all the exciting stuff, and get paid for it.
Was the Falklands War? Was this during the Falklands War?
No, it wasn't. It was 1994. But it was the first time the TA was used in peace times.
Yeah.
And we were the test for that there. So it was actually a part of history there that I was involved in. So it was really good. And it was a fantastic trip and fantastic life experience. But I got to go and travel and sort of, break myself into travel. So when I came back, then I had the bug for travel. So for the next sort of 12 years, I lived in Australia. I lived in Australia during the Olympic year. I went down in 1996, me and a lot of guys from school, and we lived in an apartment. We had great fun down there, and so for like 12 years, I just lived and travelled, went to America, South America, Africa, and I really was spoiled. There's a lot of people who want to do that but don't get the choice. They end up getting in a relationship or a job they don't want to lose, or get pregnant or something like that there, So it was fantastic that I was able to get away and travel, and it's all that time being away built me up on the inside, I think, now to sustain me during this current highly stressful part of my life. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have the wherewithal to be able to keep going, So I was very, very, very outgoing, very social person. I was the biggest idiot. I was always playing the pranks, whatever. If someone played a prank, I would do one twice as bad. I was very competitive. So I'm a very outgoing sort of person. At that point in my life, I was always the funniest outgoing person there. But no, and people didn't think I could be serious. But now that I'm in this, when I later joined the police and stuff, when I'm dealing with serious things, I deal with them seriously. Do you know what I mean? I'm just in that phase of my life. But I'm really just, I'm a normal guy, down to earth. I have 2 kids. I'm a dad, all that sort of stuff there. So just a normal guy.
So then you come back from Australia, and then you joined the police service then, is that?
So I came back. My nickname growing up was Boo. Right, so when I came back, I went and done one of them Ledu courses, and they said if you want to start your own business, if you buy a van, it's your biggest advert. Put a lot of money into it, do good advertising, and make it there's too many white vans going about, so do something. So I get a red Transit, and turned it into an 18 van. We got it sprayed. A friend of mine sprays hearses. So I was sailing about in an 18 van around Ballymena, me and my boxer dog, doing electrical work. Do you know what I mean? And they call it the Boo Team. There was like bullet points on it of all the stuff I'd done and all that sort of stuff there. Yeah. So, but at that time, I met my former wife, and I had plenty of work on, but people weren't paying me and all that sort of stuff there, and the cash flow wasn't good. And then it came out that the police were looking. It was a recruitment came out, and it was that 50-50.
Yeah.
So you had more chance. I'm a Catholic, so I had more chance of getting in because it's a very hard sought after job, So I applied at that and got in my first. It was basically because I had to provide for my children. I had a child in the way, I needed to have a decent, stable job. So I applied for the police in 2000 and got in 2006. Yeah.
So you joined there. It was a proactive drive for. At the time, it was the change it was changing from RUC to PSNI.
Yes.
It had a drive, a campaign for, there was a 50-50, but it actually was, there's a name for that, I think, when it's pro, one way, when you're trying to be equal, but you become...
Equality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so, you got into the police service, and what did you think? What was it? Did you find that was your calling? Did it fit you? Did it...
Well, I mean, because I had been in the TA, but my dad used to be in the police, an uncle was in the police, and so that's in the family. My granddad used to be a regimental sergeant major and all that sort of stuff, so that military background's in it. I wasn't necessarily drawn to it or anything else. It made sense for the numbers, for the wages, for stability, all that sort of stuff there. And
was it hard growing up as a Catholic in Ballymena and joining the army and the police service? Because there was a certain amount of stigma at the time, and there was... As we know, there was targets. They were targeted if Catholics had joined in. But I know. Thankfully, that society's moving away from that. And we're hoping that it moves faster.
Yes.
But at that time, would there have been? Well,
I went to Garntar up in Carnock. It's a school in up there, and people found out I was in the Army Cadets when I was 14, 15. And they called it the TA, and I didn't even know what that was. Are you in the TA? And they started giving me abuse at school for being in the TA or the cadets. And then when I was going to the cadets and the TA, I was getting a lot of religious abuse. Just the normal slang names people would use for Catholics, I was getting it all the time. So I was getting abuse in there for being in it. And then I was getting abuse outside it from people on my own side of the fence saying I shouldn't be in there and I was a traitor and all. And I would basically just, to the lot of them, I just want life experience. This is exciting. You're getting away for weekends, you're getting paid for it. And you're not putting food on my table.
It's a very weird situation in this country. If you go to Spain, you go to America, it's a very proud role to be a member of the police service or a member of the military. You see in America, the way they treat you first on a flight, thank you for your service. It's a very proud, it's a generational thing. If your father was in it, your grandfather was in it. It's this country. Until you travel, and as you say, and you look around, and I know people will say, people have their opinions and things, but a police service and an army service in the country is there to protect you. Mm-hmm. And it should be something that people should have pride in. We have a long history, so we'll not go into it. But what I mean is, it is a very different scenario. You've travelled a lot. Yes. So in other countries, looking at this, they wouldn't understand what we're talking about, why I was asking you about stigma, why would there be a problem with that? But here, during that time, still to now, hopefully we're changing attitudes and people are thinking. But I just wanted to go over that. But you're in the police service, mm-hmm. And what's the ranking? What are you going now?
Constable. But at its raw form, everyone, even the chief constable, holds the office of constable. They're all constables, right? Who come together because it's more efficient to work together than independently. Okay. So they're independent office holders who come together to work for a common aim.
Okay. So you're now in the police service.
Yeah. So and I really had, when I became an electrician, the way that it makes you think, it forces you to focus on stuff, to understand stuff, and it really opened my mind. It really did. It changed how I think and my perception in life and everything else. It really raised my game to be an electrician. I really recommend anyone to get a trade, and all young fellas to get a trade, because it changes your mind for the better. And so when I joined the police, that process happened again, it just upped my knowledge level and things that I had sort of, as a layperson looking at the police, when people are arrested or charged and stuff, you have an idea what it means, but you don't understand it. So I had a big steep learning curve. And my paperwork and my filing systems on it wasn't great, but I'm really good at the English language and I'm good at writing stuff and all that sort of stuff there. So a lot of natural skills that I had were very, very beneficial, and I became a very good police officer, a very effective one. Like when I went on again, my mum brought us up to have morals and ethics and think about other people in the community and other people's feelings and all that sort of stuff there. So whenever I was going on shift, I'm sitting going like, I'm covering an area tonight, and there's people out there that are sitting in their homes that are going to be victims of crime. They're going to have their oil stolen or this or that or the other thing. So I was always proactive in doing VCPs and stopping people, and just trying to help the community. And that was my attitude to the police, was to try and prevent and detect crime and do the job at its very basis. Whereas a lot of other people would get in there for a mess about and they couldn't be bothered or whatever. But I had a very good, clean attitude to it.
Yeah.
You enjoy it?
I loved it, yeah.
So that brings us then, we're moving on. A chain of events started that stopped that. So where are we at now?
So 2006 joined the police. Basically served my time for 2 years, got signed out as a police officer, and then so 2008, once the job was confirmed, then I basically had a career ahead of me and sort of semi-guaranteed income. Unless something dramatic happened, that was a job for life. So me and the wife then, the set of circumstances came up. She was getting divorced and stuff, and we bought out her ex-husband's share in her house.
Okay.
So she lived in a house, then she moved out, and I met her. He remained in the house, and then he got into difficulty with the mortgage. And then he wanted us to buy him out. So Maxine retained her share in it, and then I bought out his share. It was like a sort of hybrid mortgage, which later sort of created problems. So we bought a house, and we get an introductory offer for 2 years. It's set interest rate. And so mine was linked to the Bank of England interest rate. So at that time, because of the 2008 crash, all the interest rates started coming down. So my payment came down from like £500 or £600 a month. It came down to like £293. It was my first, because I've been traveling my whole life and stuff. This is my first house. I'm sitting going, this freaking mortgage keeper's freaking easy, like 200 and whatever for a house. You'd pay more for rent. So that introductory offer ended after 2 years, and Santander sent me a letter saying that your introductory offer is now finished. Your last payment was £295. Your new payment is like £1,100, and that's £1,000 a month after that. Do you know what I mean? And that was just, one of those letters you just sit and looking at.
So they were changing, and you know what? You're saying that now in a time that the base rate has rose for the first time in, 13 years? Mm-hmm. So the base rate has rose. So that's then forcing, and the base rate, as you said, of the Bank of England in very layman's terms, that controls the lending rate and what it's worth. So once they raise that, generally the trend is the mortgages would rise. So a lot of people at home will know this now. They're getting letters through, and if they were in a fixed term mortgage for 4 or 5 years and sending now, they will have seen that their payment's gone from £500, and this is the thing about a slight increase, 3 and 4 and 5%, it can go to £800 and £900. Yeah. You're at the same length of time. It's just you're getting charged more for the money that you effectively borrowed. Yes. So it's a very potent message at the moment, because a lot of people's getting that. So you got that there in 08. So
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm motivated to come and talk, is because the circumstances that happened to me could happen to either you or anybody listening to this podcast. And it's literally, you get a letter, and that letter is just ringing in your ears for weeks.
Did you have the option to shop around for another product, or was that the going rate?
No, so what happened then was Santander said, I asked them for a new deal, and I was told when I took the mortgage out, whenever this deal ends, just get a new one. That's what everyone does. Yeah. So when I asked them for a new deal, they says, no, your house is negative equity. So I think we borrowed 192, and our house was worth 250 grand because my wife's equity for her previous marriage was in it, but it was worth, there was equity in there. That was her takings from the previous marriage. Yeah. Right. So whenever the crash happened in 2008, all the houses dropped. Our house, I reckon, they valued it at like 190 grand. So we were just under the threshold. Do you know what I mean? If I had to get somebody else to value it, we wouldn't have been in negative equity. But they said, because you're negative equity, or we deem you to be in negative equity, we're not going to give you a new deal. So then at that point, I became a mortgage prisoner.
Yeah.
So if you're in your house and you must pay whatever they're sort of holding you to ransom, as I would now say it, and you don't pay that, they're going to repossess your house. So but you can't sell because it's negative equity. You can't get a new deal anywhere. Any other bank I went to wouldn't give me a new deal because of negative equity. That was the general policy at that time.
So a bank, for the people watching, a bank effectively loan to interest value, they want to be at about 70% of the value of the house before they step in. So they would have wanted the house to be worth 230, 240 before they would even offered, because effectively they didn't want to lend you the money.
Yes.
Because they've seen it as toxic debt. They're worried that if you defaulted, if you defaulted, they would be left in a worse position, because if you continue paying, that was fine, but if they've been so there you were. All of a sudden, you've had a 100% increase in your mortgage.
Yes. Oh no, it's more than that. It was like 3 times the amount. Almost 3 times the amount.
Okay. So right. Jesus, that's some eye opener. And then, and a lot of people in 08, 09 or 07, 08 sort of thing. It was the peak in repossessions too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So a lot of people find themselves in that position. What did you do? What was the next thing to do?
After I made inquiries to try and get a new deal and try and negotiate a way out of it and couldn't find it, then basically they were holding me to ransom, and it was like, pay us what we want. So then I had to divert all of my disposable income to paying that mortgage every month, which left us that we couldn't afford all the basic stuff. So our standard of life dropped through the floor. We couldn't afford, buying clothes for the Waynes, getting a fill of oil, all that sort of stuff there. Her mum was helping us out, and stuff like that there. And as a man, you want to go out and provide for your family.
It's emasculating.
Yeah, it really is. So I couldn't earn more money. I mean, nowadays you can do all the side hustles online and stuff like that there. At that time, it wasn't available. I couldn't get a second job, all those sort of problems. Couldn't bring in more money, so I had to have less outgoings.
You're not allowed a second income as a police officer, are you?
No, you can. You can do that there. I could have got a second job, but if I'm working 40 to 60,
shifts,
all the shifts and all that sort of stuff there, it just wasn't workable. I was shattered when I was off, and then I'm dealing with young children and stuff like that there, and you do spend time with your children. You don't have children. You have children to raise them. They're the most important thing in your life, and you're working to provide for them. So I didn't want to go and end up being a freaking slave and running about, never see my children. So, so I forgot your question.
No, so I was saying, so you're now, your quality of life's completely changed.
Yes.
Did you fall into arrears?
No, I didn't. For a full calendar year, I paid them everything they wanted, and it was our personal life that suffered. Yeah. So I'm sitting looking at my kids and my wife, and we're not getting a holiday, and I thought you joined the Painters, you're going to have 3 holidays a year and a share in a yacht and whatever else. Do you know what I mean? And the reality of that just wasn't happening, no matter how many hours I worked. So I decided that I didn't want to be a debt slave. So I went to the Citizens Advice, got information, and the information they gave me basically is the same stuff that the bank's giving you. Pay your debt. If you don't pay it, it's going to be repossessed. There was nothing there that I could work on. So I started going to meetings down in Dublin.
So you went to Citizens Advice Bureau?
Yes. And basically, I intuitively knew the information they were giving me was basically just...
pay up.
Yes, pay up. Do as you're told. So then I started online searching for stuff, found some people, and they were making reference to different meetings down south. There was a guy who wrote a book called The Blank of Ireland, right? It's about the Bank of Ireland and how he had been in this big massive fight with them. And this was just like this ninja warrior guy that was saying totally different stuff, making about the creation of money and banks up to all these sordid activities and stuff. So I went down to their meetings, met a whole lot of people. Some of them were like real renegades, were wanting to, let's go and kill the bankers and all that sort of stuff. And there was people that weren't doing enough, weren't being effective enough. They were too scared. And then there's people in the middle that were being sensible, calm, rational. And as a serving police officer, I had to be seen to be doing that. So I went and took in all these different perspectives. And the decision I made was, it's called an official offer. Legal document, you draw it up, and basically you're saying to the bank that you're going to give them X amount of money per month for all of your liabilities. So if you have 2 loans with them, whatever, you're giving them 1 payment every month. You cancel a direct debit, and then every month, first of the month, you go down and pass the money over the counter and you pay it. And you're not saying you're not going to pay them. You're just saying at this minute in time, I'm reducing the payments so that I can, afford the other stuff in my life. And as my circumstances improve, I'll increase it. So that lasted for maybe 6 months, and then I was straight into court. Got these letters saying I had to go to room 118 in the Royal Courts of Justice, and that was just, that's a scary moment. Like,
so you got summons to court.
Yes. The
reality of this is getting serious now.
Yeah.
Where were you at in your head? Where had you? What was your ideology? What What was your ideological?
Ideological.
What was your ideological? What was your thought pattern then when you were going to court? You're like, nope, I've had enough. This is Samson and Goliath here. They bullied enough. Or were you ready to say, right, okay, we're going back to that?
Well, I had tried to look at the possibility of doing new deals or getting new things. I didn't want to not pay my mortgage. I didn't want to get into trouble. I didn't want any of this being basically flagged up to my bosses or bringing me undue interest or any of that sort of stuff there. So I wanted to just sort of glide under. But the bottom line was Santander's position where pay us what we want every month or we're going to take your house. Okay. When I spoke to them on the phone.
Yeah, so what you sent in them and what you were going to pay, they weren't happy with that.
No.
They were like, no, we want you to pay what you owe us.
Yes.
And it's just as simple as that.
And the reality was it was for an interest-only mortgage. So if I paid them all that money for the next 25 years, at the end of 25 years, they would say, where's the full amount of money you owe us now?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's just financial suicide. I wasn't getting into that. Do you know what I mean? So I knew how to sort something out. I tried to do it sort of the right way, and then I went and looked at all these different perspectives, and then I decided what I was going to do, and I did it. And then I found myself in court. So the one question I want to ask you is I mean, especially you said to me you haven't been in High Court. So as two ordinary guys, what's your perception of the legal system in Northern Ireland? So if you get brought to court for a repossession, what would you anticipate would happen in the court?
The wee man gets screwed.
Really?
Basically.
Yeah.
And who has the most money to represent themselves will walk out. And maybe it's completely wrong, but maybe that's based on news, maybe that's based on TV, but the balance of justice tends to favour the money. Yeah. Well, that's a perspective.
But then there's also two sides of that. There's two different sides to that justice system. So there's am I right in saying there's one side deals with like criminals and somebody has pickpocketed or stole stuff, and then there's we're taking you to court because we want to get your money.
That was a High Court, wasn't it?
Yes.
High Court.
So again, me being in the police, I had 10 years to get into the criminal courts.
Yeah.
Right. And the resident magistrate, the RM in Coleraine, there's one that was there for long term, and then he left and he was replaced by Justice McNally. And the two of them were incredible people. I have a huge respect for them. So the point I really want to get across is that at no time have I ever been anti-judge.
Because you would have worked with the judges to take scumbags off the street.
Yeah, so I'm going out and arresting people, bringing them before a judge and giving that judge the full trust that he'll do the right thing. And if there's enough evidence to prosecute someone for something, they'll get prosecuted, and if there isn't, they won't. And I found that over those 10 years.
You didn't have a preconceived arguments with a judge or a chip that, I don't like judges or I've had a bad run.
Not at all, no.
Okay.
I had full respect for them there, and they were doing their job, and I found them to be professional, especially to say, I can't say enough about Justice McNally. If I was put in charge in Northern Ireland, I would make him the Lord Chief Justice because he's such a high calibre of an individual.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Sean.
But then you found yourself then going to the High Court.
Yes.
So explain what a High Court is.
So
then.
the High Court, the Royal Courts of Justice in Belfast, that's where basically all the civil laws practice. So there's all different types of law. So there's criminal law, there's civil law, and then that's broken down into like probate. So if someone dies and they leave a will, that's probate. And then there's the repossessions, the chancery, the commercial court. There's all the different, when two businesses fall out and stuff, there's all the different facets of court and different court. Then there's bankruptcy as a whole specialised field in its own. So I was getting in there.
Is it fair to say that's where the dough is? That's where the money sides of things.
Yeah, that's, as I said, when I go in there now, there's a big atrium in the Royal Courts of Justice. And when I go in my mind's eye, I see like a fountain of golden coins falling into like a big golden bath, a big tub. And the people that are attracted to go in there are just feeding from that trough. And as I say, I really want to point out, I'm not saying that I don't have chip on my shoulder about solicitors, barristers, or judges. I want a proper justice system, and I want justice to prevail. People are entitled to a fair trial and stuff, but within that industry, there are crooked people that are doing very dodgy stuff.
Before we go into a review of that, you went into court, so I take it you attended the court.
Yes.
And what was the ruling, or what was the outcome of that?
I went in. I didn't even know what an affidavit was. I was dealing with police statements.
Yeah.
And you have to sign at the bottom of police statement and stuff. And there's stuff. If you're telling porcupines in your statement, you can get in trouble.
Yeah.
An affidavit is you have to pick up a Bible in your right hand, and you have to swear that what's in that document is the truth to the best of your knowledge. And if you're caught telling lies, then that's the offence of perjury. you're telling lies about something you've a sworn document. So you can go to jail for 7 years for that. Okay. So I didn't know what an affidavit was. Someone had to send me a template. I had to figure out everything to do with mortgages, the legal system, a different part of the legal system than I was accustomed to. But because I had been in court for 10 years, walking through the gates of the Royal Courts of Justice didn't cause me any anxiety. I was able to walk in there and function fully. Whereas some people, when they go up to the door, they're just, as soon as they go to walk through the gate, they go to a bag of nerves. Do you know what I mean? They can't think, they can't speak. Whereas that didn't affect me at all, you know. So I went in there and I spent got 2 years getting into room 118. And at the end of it, you know, I was just throwing arguments in and trying to find my feet. But at the end of 2 years, Santander got a possession order. One of the key arguments that I raised with them was about securitization. The fact that banks would sell bunches of mortgages to third parties. So there's an incident in America where a bank, one of them being like Chase Manhattan, I can't remember the name of the bank, but they sold mortgages, and the people they sold them to was the FARC guerrillas, you know, like the Colombian drug mafias, and basically they were money laundering. So the drug dealers gave the bank cash to buy all of these houses, and then every month when those people were paying their mortgage, the bank would take in the money, take away 2% for themselves, and then pass clean money to these drug. You know, and that's in the public domain. You can go and research that. So securitizations where banks sell your home. So what it comes down to is they seem to be able to split the title, which I don't think makes sense, and they shouldn't be able to do. So there's the legal title and there's the equitable title. So they say the bank claim that they retain the legal title the entire time, and they're just selling the equitable interest, and it's a normal part of banking. But Santander said that they had never sold my mortgage, and they said that in a sworn affidavit. So they swore on a Bible that they had never done that. And then as a result of those proceedings, they got a possession order. During the appeal, then up into so you start off at master level, room 118, and then you move up into the chancery. So it's a proper judge. During that appeal, Santander said that voluntarily said that they were going to get a solicitor from Santander as opposed to the local solicitors in Belfast. A solicitor in Santander's headquarters was going to do an affidavit addressing some of my concerns. And that affidavit came, it was supposed to be, they had 2 months to do it, but it didn't come for like 4 months. It was unstamped, unsigned, all this. It was really poor paperwork. But in the middle of it, there was a paragraph, and they admitted that they had securitized my mortgage. So they had committed perjury in the previous proceedings. So I said to the judge that, you know, they've committed perjury here. They've told lies in order to steal my house. And that was the words that I chose to use. And the judge, basically, he was like a deer in the headlights, you know, and he took what I said seriously. So he adjourned and went out and came back in about 30 minutes later, dressed in this like purple big gown and the wig, and the whole atmosphere changed. And he made a ruling against Santander, and he struck out their possession order in my favour.
So basically, Santander lied.
They committed perjury in their affidavits, yes.
So it was a common practice back in 08 to sell negative debt, NAMA, all
Yes.
them things. What they would do is write it off because the year was away to shit, and they wanted to start it new.
Yeah.
For their thing. So, okay, you fought them, got the repossession order cancelled,
Yes. And
but this hasn't gone away.
no, so at that point I didn't know whether I still had a mortgage, still owed the money or anything else, but I knew that there was no one I knew that had, there was actually one other guy that had got his overturned because they hadn't registered a charge at the land registry, and he got it there, so he had won that before, but there's no other case we could find. So I didn't know what it meant, but all I knew was that the threat, you know, whenever there's repossession and you have kids, there's someone going to come and try and throw you out in the street. And I knew that threat had gone away. Yes. So I fear nothing, but I risk assess everything. So that threat had gone away. So within a few weeks, they sent a letter, and the letter basically said that they were going to enter into and take possession of my premises. This letter. And I was going, but I won the case. So I went down to the court office and showed it to them, and they went, that does say that, but they can't do that because you won. We were all talking about it. So it turned out that's just the standard letter that they send out to all homeowners.
Strong arm you.
Yes. And it's for me, it's psychological warfare. It's you know.
And they use very threatening legal terminology.
Yes.
Okay.
So I can remember getting in, there's a company called RG Sinclair that used to be in Belfast, and they were the solicitor firms that were dealing with me, and it was their general manager that told the lies in her affidavit. Okay. And when I went into their office to view documents, I went in and there was a desk, and it was probably as wide as this. You know, there was a girl sitting at it, and there was two posts and a glass shelf, and that glass shelf had documents this high, the full width, and they were being sent out to families in Northern Ireland just before Christmas. And I was like, this is like, I couldn't believe it. This was just like an industrial machine that was taking people's houses. And that day I vowed, I said, what I wanted to come out of this is I wanted to shut down their office. You know, I wanted to stop that happening to people in Northern Ireland. And because I knew they're up to badness, and they told lies and affidavits, and they were just what they were doing. And I wanted the Santander as well. You know, at some stage when I finish with this fight, and I'm in it to the death now, remember Abbey National took over Santander.
Yeah.
Some other bank's going to come in and take over this bank, and Santander won't be in the UK anymore because of the stuff I've seen them doing. It's crimes. It honestly is crimes.
Well, I'm going to play a wee bit of devil's advocate for a simple reason. In 08, 07, now some people, they were given mortgages, the accountability for mortgages. Money was for nothing. There was people buying to let, interest free, buying a house this month, flipping it 2 months later, making 40 grand, paying back the mortgage, and they're gone and they're on. There was people that should not have obtained mortgages during that time. They shouldn't have been allowed the money. It wasn't stable enough. The property didn't, the numbers didn't add up. But there was people exploiting the system.
Yes.
Which hurt other people.
Yes.
Like so yourself,
yes,
that genuinely wanted to keep their own home and pay. They should have received repossession orders.
Yes.
They should have had houses repossessed because they hurt. When the system gets abused, the banks don't lose. We do.
That's right, yeah.
It's the same with insurance companies. Yeah. They're not out. Same with government offering bounce backs and whatever. Everyone was talking about, you're getting laid off or you're getting furloughed and all. Ultimately, who pays for it? So, I know you're saying you want to shut them down and some of that to stop.
Yeah.
You wanted to stop what was happening to you.
Yes.
But some of them should have got what was coming down the line.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, so
you're unsure now. You don't know. Are they taking your house? Are you in it? What? Because it's uncharted water. This I would imagine.
Yes. So basically, what they did was that letter that said they're going to enter and take possession of my premises or my home. We had booked a week's holiday away in Spain to go try and get away and get our heads showered, and the week that the 7 days expired while we were gone. So I thought I was going to come back to my house and all my stuff would be in a skip and the doors would be locked. So I went in and took out High Court injunction against Santander. It was the first time it was ever done in the UK, and I was successful. I got an injunction saying that they couldn't contact. They were spamming me with phone calls, letters, emails. They were just spamming me, and I wanted a break. I'd had enough of that litigation for 2 years. So they gave me a High Court injunction, and I went off on my holiday and came back, and thinking that they wouldn't have contacted me. Now let's just do away with it. So when I walked into court that day for the injunction, there was me. I named RG Sinclair and Santander separately in the summons. So they had a legal team each. So there was 2 QCs, 2 barristers, 2 solicitors, and a wee junior. So and if I lost, I was paying all their bills, So it turned out I got the injunction, went on my holiday, came back, and then there was 5 letters in my house. So when I'm back into court, as a matter of principle, I says, look, I asked them, do not contact me and give me a break. They wouldn't listen to me, so I got an injunction, and now they won't listen to the court. I said, so I want to keep the injunction. I want them to stop contacting me and give me a break because we're under a lot of stress. So the judge, he kept the injunction for another month. He was really annoyed about it. He thought we could just get rid of it. So they had it for another month, and one letter came back to the house. And what Santander done was quite clever. They changed my address inside Santander to be Santander's head office. So if any department up and down the length and breadth of the UK sent out a letter by accident, it would wing back and go to the headquarters and wouldn't come to me. And this was a confirmation letter. So they breached the High Court injunction, I think, about 9 times. And I was entitled to damages for each one. But because of the amount of money, the High Court couldn't deal with it. So they said I had to go and take this case to the county court, and I've still never done it. You know what I mean? I'm not money orientated, and my head was too stressed to go and do that, but I was entitled to damages for that.
Can I ask, while this was happening, were you paying anything towards the mortgage?
I was. Right. I was still continuing to pay that small amount.
The fee that you had agreed?
Yes.
Well, not agreed, sorry. The fee that you had issued them a notice for.
Yes. So in 2013,
Yeah.
whenever Santander admitted that they had securitized the mortgage, at that point, because they had, in my age, were committing fraud, they were, they were being dishonest in everything they were doing. I didn't want to take part in that anymore. So I said at that point I wasn't going to pay the mortgage. So I stopped paying the mortgage in 2013 and haven't paid a penny since.
Okay. And it was just for clarity, and so I wanted to know. Right. So where are we at now? You've got the injunction. You've went into the court, and a judge will not like, especially a high court judge, will not like that if an order they have issued has not been followed. Mm-hmm. So you have went back and says, they very cleverly rounded that, when obviously this was an ongoing thing. Mm-hmm. So you're back in court again. You're representing yourself all throughout this, right? So you're back in court again.
Yes.
With, is it that legal firm you were discussing, and you're back with Santander? Ultimately, what way did this go then? So
I took out the injunction, and basically that letter they sent me was them commencing a second round of litigation. So they came at me a second time. So there's a maxim of law. It's called res judicata, double jeopardy. You can't be done for the same thing twice. And it's used very often against lay litigants like myself. You try and take a case against the court and they say, no, that's all been dealt with before, it's res judicata. But yet when I argue res judicata, it doesn't cut any dealt with them. So they came at me a second time. So whenever that happened, I sent off to Santander for a subject access request, looking for a copy of all my documents. When the documents came, there was a grey plastic envelope with just 2 or 3 inches of paperwork. And it sat in my office for a long time, and I was going through it one day looking for something, and I came across this document, and it's called a listings document. And it's like a statement, only there's more information. Every transaction's got a 3-letter code. At the back, there's a legend that tells you what the codes mean. So there was CST and CSR. And it says capital securitized to and capital securitized from, CST and CSF. So I said securitization, that's what they did with my mortgage. So I went down through this transaction and came across CST.
They were paying out to whoever had the deed.
Yeah. So when I looked across this, all of the numbers, what I saw a payment for £192,000 coming into my account, and the balance of my mortgage was 0 on this listings document.
It sold your mortgage.
Yeah. But my statements coming to my house showed £192,000 of a balance. It never reflected that 0 balance. So at the same day, so basically there's 2 transactions in one day, £192,000 coming in, balance going to 0. Same day, the money disappears and the balance goes back up as if it never happened, right? And then, so during litigation, when Santander admitted that they securitized my mortgage, and that affidavit that they gave, they said the 2 dates that they securitized it to and from. So they securitized it on a certain date, and then they bought it back on a different date. Those 2 exact dates were these mysterious payments came in. So where did the money come from? Santander, as it turns out, I think the 2 transactions are Abbey covered bonds as an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, and they're the entity that bought my mortgage. So they transferred £192,000 to Santander, but they put it into my account and then out into a slush fund, and so they could track it. So if they do that 1,000 times, when it goes through your account, they can track it. So the money goes from the SPV into my account and then into their slush fund. It stays there. They invest it. So they had it for 13 months. So if I give you guys £192,000 and you're really switched on investors, how much money could you make from that in 13 months?
Well, they reckon 10% minimum.
Right.
So they made 13 grand.
Do you think?
Well, maybe, but there's 190, so there's 20 grand.
Yes.
But so just for people that's listening, let's just be clear here. It's not illegal for a bank to sell your mortgage. It's a product. A mortgage is a viable product.
Yeah.
It's a money-making product. They can sell that to somebody else, but they have to notify you.
They have to notify you and stuff like that. They didn't do any of those
because
things.
it's a common enough practice. So
it's a common enough practice.
And hedge funds all the time buy up mortgages or buy up things.
Yes.
Banks use that if they want to liquidate some of the mortgages they hold over things. But you've now figured out that they've sold it. That's not in itself entirely illegal.
No, it's not. It's a standard practice within the industry.
Yeah.
But there's certain things they can and can't do. So they're purporting to the public. First of all, they're saying we didn't sell it, and then when we caught them on and they admitted they had done it, then they rotate it back and says, but we only sold the equitable interest and we retained legal title. So there's the whole argument about securitisation that's been dealt with in different cases in the UK and found to be okay. But there's people that are now investigating it, and basically what the information they're coming up with is that the bank, in this case Santander, has sold the legal right. They've sold everything, okay, including the legal right. And when they do that, they lose the locus standi. So it's like if I have a caravan and I sell it to you, and then 2 days later something happens to it, I can't take someone to court for damaging the caravan because I no longer own it. I no longer have locus standi.
Right. Okay. So your question is, why has Santander taken you to court if they no longer legally have it should have been Abbey or whoever was the legal entity that owned your actual property?
Yes, so there's a stated case, and I have to be careful here because of certain information that I'm allowed to give at the minute and can't. Right, so basically there's stated cases in the English courts that says even if they sell the equitable interest, that they cannot buy it back and they lose the locus standi. So if I'm able to, so I've got new information I'm seeking at the minute. I was supposed to go over a few there about a month ago, but because of litigation and stuff, I wasn't able to go. But at the outset, this information will prove that Santander has no locus standi in my case, which means that 13 years of litigation, my daughter's 12. So her entire life I've been fighting the bank, and I've missed so much time with raising her and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And this is vexatious litigation. They should never have took me into court in the first place.
But let's move on now. So we've been back in, haven't we?
Yeah, back in the court.
Yes. So they've come at me in a second wave. I've got this listings document, and I open it up, and as a police officer, I see prima facie evidence. There's documentary evidence that the bank had been paid the full amount of the mortgage, but they had never disclosed that to the court. This is all secretive, and and they have to be open and transparent and say what's happening. So they had these secret payments, plus I'd caught them telling lies before, plus there was maybe half a dozen other reasons, arguments as to why I thought their second case against me should be struck out. So I put in a strikeout application in the High Court of Justice, and it was heard in 2015.
Okay.
So I went in there. It was over 3 days, and there's legislation called the Bankers Book of Evidence Act 1882, and it's basically that anybody in High Court proceedings against the bank can make an application to the court under the Bankers Books, and the judge will order the bank to produce their books within 72 hours. So I was in a position where Santander were telling lies. I didn't trust them, and I had information that there was now secret payments being made that they hadn't disclosed to the court, and I had no confidence that they would be open and transparent. I didn't trust them. I still don't trust them. So I tried to rely on that legislation. So it's still in force, hasn't been repealed. It's exactly for these circumstances. So I made an application to the judge under the Bankers Book of Evidence because of the weight of the evidence I had against Santander, and I didn't trust them. That basically either if we get a Bankers Book of Evidence application and we reveal all the true information, it'll either prove me to be wrong. At that point I would pay the mortgage. I would just go back to paying the mortgage. If they've done nothing wrong, I'd go back to paying the mortgage or sell the house or whatever, or else it'll prove that they're telling lies. But it would end the case either way. So I made the strikeout application, and in it I made a Bankers Book of Evidence application. And so the judge fobbed me off the first day, and I went back and done my paperwork and stuff like that, and brainstormed it, and I come up with a stated case from, again, the 1800s, as ex parte livesy case, which basically means in legislation anywhere, if legislation says may means must. If someone can derive a benefit. So if it says in legislation that a judge may do something, may means must. So I used a Supreme Court, like a House of Lords case, along with this Bankers Book of Evidence. So the judge was compelled to give me the Bankers Book. He should have given it to me anyway in those set of circumstances so we can find out the truth. But so basically he fobbed me off the first time, and then he made a further application on day 2 or day 3, and then he adjourned it. And I thought he adjourned it for like half an hour or something, but he adjourned it for like 2 or 3 months. So in the meantime, I sent him an email, and I said to him, given the weight of the evidence I have before me, and the fact that they were caught lying already, if you were to find against me, without granting this Bankers Book of Evidence, so that we can have open and transparency, that it would be my position that you'd be committing a criminal offence. Because over 6 years of me being in the police, going to all these meetings and helping people and seeing what was going on, time and time again, I saw people with really good evidence going into court and the judges continually finding against the individual in favour of the banks.
Looking at this impartially, so you have emailed the judge directly to say, if you find against me, I deem this criminal.
No.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is
if it finds against you without disclosing the full amount.
No. So what I'm saying is there is a legal mechanism whereby the judge just, if he makes the decision, yes, I'll grant that. Within 72 hours, Santander will give me all of their books, and then we can look at the facts rather than what they cherry pick and decide to give us or decide to suppress.
Yeah.
Right. So we can look at all of the books, and I've given enough evidence here to show that they have been dishonest before. And then there's these mysterious payments where my mortgage was zeroed. So there's too many questions here. So I'm seeking to rely on legislation, which I shouldn't have to explain myself for. If you make that application, the judge may instruct the bank. And then that stated case from the House of Lords says may means must. So the judge must, if I make an application, he must give the bankers books. So I'm relying on, in there, they don't care about emotions and feelings and all that sort of stuff. They talk to facts, and it's about legislation and stated cases.
If you can show them a precedent where this has happened before, they must. So
you find yourself back in court asking for this information then in front of the judge?
So I asked the judge for the banker's book of evidence, and I had a lot of reasons for that and evidence to support that, even though, in my opinion, I shouldn't have to try and justify asking for something that I should be entitled to in law and that any reasonable person should be entitled to. So I sent him an email and I said, if you were to, because I had seen judges finding against homeowners on a continuous basis when they had really strong cases, it was like the banks win no matter what. So I tested it myself. And so I was in a position where I knew all the facts in my case, I knew what was going on, and I put this application to the judge. And so if he was a fair and impartial judge, he would grant that so we can all see the truth. And if he was siding with the bank and basically trying to quiet me down and not give me a fair trial, then I would see that from his decision-making process. So I sent him an email and I says, in my opinion, if you find against me and you don't grant me the banker's book of evidence, for me that was evidence that he was like conspiring or colluding with them or siding with them to my detriment and trying to put me and my kids out of my house. So I took it very seriously.
Did you receive a response from that?
The secretary responded and says, email's been received, I'll pass this on to the judge. You know, he'll get your email.
Would outside looking in, Sean, if you received an email to say, if you don't, and I'm just playing this really thing, if you don't find in favour of me, not that you don't find, but you did say, if you don't allow me a fair shot at this, I would have my suspicions that you're did you say colluding? You used the term colluding? Well,
that's the general gist of what I feel there, but I didn't say that in the email. I was very respectful in the email.
Okay.
I'm never disrespectful to people, but my logic and reason, when I logicked this all out and looked at the picture that I had seen for the previous 6 years, and were you going towards?
Probably what I'm asking is, were you going towards that idea? I've presented the fact here, he should do this. He didn't do this.
Yes.
I'm now starting to suspect that this isn't on the level.
Yes.
And you've disclosed them feelings in a respectful way. But what I'm saying is, Sean, the email coming in, do you think it could have antagonized the judge? Because judges are very notoriously don't question my integrity, don't dare bring me into disrepute. That it may have come across at that point, and I am, and this is me antagonizing. I am playing it from the people that's listening here as a neutral. That the it wouldn't have been common practice, and let's also look at this. You must have done serious research into the law, because to be a police officer, you know the laws you need to uphold.
Yes,
but knowing the law and legislation is a massively different thing.
Really is.
So you were, I would say, errors and errors, because if you pulled up cases like that, you had to go to the bar, you had to go somewhere to get them. So to throw and this, to anyone listening to this, if you state a high court case that has previously went before, the judge then must side if this has been sided with before. Is that a fair enough assessment?
Well, no. So what would happen is if I put in a stated case, and
Yes.
put in a successful argument and a skeleton argument, then the other side would have to do a responding skeleton argument and argue why that doesn't apply, and they would
Yes.
use their citations.
In other words, this is not the same as apples and pears.
Yes.
It's right. Okay. Right. So you've emailed the judge. You're going back in. Where are we at?
So we're on the 12th of January 2016. So at that point there, on a side issue, my former wife's son was in a car crash, and he was in a coma, and still to this day, he's not a functioning adult. Like, he's really badly injured. He's in a home now permanently. He can't walk, can't talk, can't speak,
Jesus.
can't feed himself. Okay, he was in a car crash. I had spent 6 years working in this case. I got to the point where I had sent the email, and my case was sitting primed, and I still have to defend my home and protect my children and look at all this thing. And I'm also looking at the bigger picture for the society, for the people that's listening to this here, because anyone could be facing this at any time. So I went into court that day, and I just went straight back into professional freaking court mode, just focused on what was going on. And when the judge came out, he made it very apparent early on that he was for finding against me. And he was basically just saying that all my arguments were complete nonsense, which they clearly weren't. Like, some of the guys I'm working with are real academics, and they're getting into like the nitty gritty of ancient law and all these different things, stated cases,
sorry,
everything else.
can I ask that? And I'm jumping in here. Sorry about that. But you haven't been doing this alone. Is this the guys you talked about you met in the south at a meeting?
There's a network of people who
Want to expose all this? Is that
well, what they're doing is, again, they're all interested in justice, and there's a few loopers in there, and there has to be everywhere. But there's what I found is really credible, family orientated people that have just.
Is there a name to the group that's happening? Have they formed an association, or is this just a group of guys, or have you a name, or is there?
Well, in the same way that if someone thinks differently and questions authority, they can be labelled as a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
If someone questions the banks and the courts, and they try and go at it a different way than the standard process, they can be called a free man of the land.
Yeah.
The free men. But the free men are a standalone group, and they have certain arguments that about common law and all sort of stuff here. And I never engage in any of those things. I'm just.
Some of them are quite radical.
Yes,
we've seen that some of them.
And they certainly are, but some of them have a lot of credible evidence to back up what they're saying.
So it was the free men, but some of what your case resonated, and these guys obviously very clever, because some of the stuff that you have obviously presented, and if you've exposed Santander for telling a lie, a multinational corporation bank. So I'm sorry, because I'm intrigued, and I am sorry because I'm jumping in and I'm thinking, but I want to make sure that people are listening, are keeping on top of where we're at here. Mm-hmm. So you've went in, and it's become obvious to you that the judge is not. What did you just pick up a tone straight away, or was it the mannerism, or
it was a mixture of everything there. But when he came out and he started speaking, he was reading his judgment, right? And as again, I was brought up never to be respectful and to treat people properly and stuff like that there, and I wasn't going to interrupt him or be rude or anything else. So he's reading out his judgment. When he's reading it, he was basically saying that all of my arguments were nonsense, and it was all, and it was very well researched stuff. And I filtered out all the sort of everything that was in my case was well researched and based on law, facts, evidence, logic, and reason. And I didn't allow any of the free man stuff. I'm just a father trying to protect my home, and I wanted the best evidence. And I was relying on my 10 years in the police. That experience that I had was my basis of starting this fight, and I always ran it through that filter. Is this logical? Is it based on facts, evidence, logic, and reason? Is there stated cases? Is there evidence to support this? And I didn't engage with the free man stuff. Do you know what I mean? I stayed away from all that stuff. So whenever he was poo-pooing all of my arguments, and so I just thought, right, he's definitely going to find against me. And I went into police mode. And I thought, given all of the experiences, everything that I had seen and experienced, the facts that I knew about my own case personally, did I honestly believe that he was committing a criminal offence? Was he just finding against me? I keep my emotions in check. I wasn't emotional about it. I wasn't like angry. How dare you find it? It was none of that at all. It wasn't ego based.
I find that hard to and I'm not saying I do find it a wee bit hard, because you would have been confident in your case, and you'd have been confident, and you are emotionally charged. It's your home.
Yes.
So you'd have been confident that what you have stated is legal, is correct, and you were going to win.
Yes.
And then you could see it unfolding in front of you that you weren't.
Yeah, so if I go back
it's very hard to take the emotion out of that. Are you sure at some point you weren't charged with in that? Because it's your home. It's a natural
No.
instinct to protect your home.
On my life, 100% no. The one thing that I do is keep my emotions in check.
Okay.
I'm very, very good at that. I keep my emotions in check. What I did is I took myself back into my police career. When I get into a criminal case, I'm looking at the evidence, facts, documents, and evidence, and you're looking at them being built up. Is there enough to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this person committed that crime? There either is or is not enough evidence. So I'm in the civil law applying the same logic, going, do I have enough evidence to suggest that Santander are being dishonest and they're trying to suppress information to my detriment? And then if I believe that's true and I've asked the judge to give me a banker's book of evidence, which you're entitled to, it's legislation and a stated case and all backing it up, if he's looking to achieve justice, the least he will do, he'll either grant me my strikeout, or the middle ground would be a banker's book of evidence. He'll go for the safe area and go, right, we'll get a banker's book of evidence and then we'll look at facts and we'll see who's right and who's wrong. But for him to on the strength of my application, I felt I should have won, right? But the middle ground was the banker's book of evidence. But for him to dismiss both of those and find in favour of Santander, I thought the pendulum swung far too far, and for me that was the evidence. Again, I just looked at my mind.
If there was any element of doubt,
none.
But I mean, if he had any element of doubt, he had previous court orders, injunctions. You had already categorically stated and found that Santander had lied.
Yes.
If there was any shred of doubt, surely providing you with that wasn't an issue.
Exactly. What was he going to lose? If I was wrong and I was making stuff up and I was in this nutcase that just didn't want to pay his mortgage, whatever he thought, the proof would be in the pudding by the banker's book of evidence. And what I found now then and since is that at all costs, the High Court in Belfast are stopping people. They're resisting them and turning them down for banker's book of evidence applications.
Have you checked how many times it's been applied for and how many times it's been granted?
I'm not able to get that information, but from the circle of people that I'm with, numerous people have tried it and every one of them has been turned down.
Okay.
The courts aren't allowing it.
So then what happened?
So he basically is in the process of reading through his judgment. I didn't interrupt him, so I just knew the game was up, and I started putting my stuff into my bag, and I'm sitting there and I was putting it in, and I was frustrated. So I did have emotion. I was frustrated that I'm sitting here going, like, what do I need to do to get justice in Northern Ireland? This is clearly a miscarriage of justice in my eyes. So I revert back into police mode, and I asked myself a simple question that police have to ask is, do I honestly believe that that person has committed a criminal offence? And so if you commit it, if I was in a set of circumstances where someone come out of a door and says, a guy in there in a red jumper just stabbed me with a knife, right? And the guy that did it ran out the back door and was away, and there was a different guy in a red jumper in the same building. If I went in there, I could reasonably assume that he was the person, and I could arrest him on suspicion of committing that offence. So to arrest someone isn't the end of the world. There's people get arrested, and it's a wrongful arrest, and they get de-arrested and stuff. I asked myself the question, do I honestly believe he committed a criminal offence? And the answer was yes. Did he step over it? And so I had went and looked at the different possibilities. I didn't plan to arrest him. It's like me going out on a Saturday night to Kelly's nightclub. You're standing outside, you don't go to plan to arrest someone. But if when you're there someone commits a criminal offence, disorderly behaviour or something, you have to make your decision at that point. You know, the legislation and stuff. So I looked at different criminal offences. So the Fraud Act 2006 is fraud by suppression of documents. If you have control of documents and you suppress those documents in order to cause a gain for one party or a loss for another, that is a criminal offence. So in my opinion, he had just used his judicial influence to suppress those documents that I should be entitled to in order to cause a gain for Santander and to cause a loss for me in losing the home. So did he fulfil the criteria of the definition of that offence? I was 100% clear. So there was 5 different offences. So I had looked at all these different offences and worked out what I thought the offences would be. And so I break them down in the AV7. So I did a PowerPoint at AV7, so the alternative view 7. It's under my Thomas Anthony Carlin. So I've done it's on my Thomas Anthony Carlin YouTube page. It's me doing a talk in front of 300 people where I break down the legislation, the offences, the wording of the Fraud Act. I explain it very clearly. So I explain what physically happened, and then I explain the legislation, and I break it all down, and I'm saying, so here's what he did, and here's what the legislation says. Does that legislation exactly match what he did for that offence? Yes. And here's the second offence. Here's the definition. Here's what he did. Does that match? And they all exactly match. They're really close. The offences that I arrested him for are very close to what his actions were, and I still stand over them. I strongly suspect that he did it. I would even go as far as saying that I don't suspect that he done it. I witnessed him doing it.
So sorry there, you just said that you arrested the judge then?
Right. So what happened was I was putting all my books away, and I'm sitting there thinking, and I went back in the police mode, and then I made the decision, yes, I do honestly believe he's committed a criminal offence. So then if you're a police officer and you're off duty, so there was an incident where a young police officer just came out of the depot and he was in a filling station. He come off shift, so he was off duty. He was in a filling station. He had his firearm on him, you know, as undercover holster. And there's a druggie held up the people behind the counter, put a needle to their throat. And he took out his gun and he shot them. He brought himself on duty, as he's duty bound to do under the code of ethics in the police, and he shot the man. And then, so he was took off duty for a while. You know, he was basically not suspended, but he was took off active duty, and that was all investigated, and it was found that his actions were lawful. So you're a police officer 24/7, even though you work shifts. But if something happens in front of you that requires you to bring yourself on duty, you're duty bound to do it. If you don't do it, you're in trouble. So the code of ethics, I was thinking, I thought about the code of ethics and everything too. So if I believe a criminal offence has happened, I'm duty bound to bring myself on duty and take action. So whenever it happened, I didn't allow him, but I waited until he finished reading his judgment. And when he finished reading his judgment, he asked the other side about costs. I take it you're looking for costs. And they says, oh yes, my lord, we're looking for costs. That's the loss for me. Right, so remember I said that the Fraud Act causing a gain for one party or a loss, that's when it triggered in, so when he's talking about costs. And he asked me my attitude to costs. And I stood forward, took my warrant card out of my back pocket and held it aloft. And I said, I'm a serving police officer in PSNI, and I'm now arresting you for 5 criminal offences. I told him what each of the 5 offences were, and then I read him his Article 3 caution. You don't have to say anything about much caution you do not mention, and I read him the full caution. While I was doing that, he was raising his voice and shouting at me to sit down and all this sort of stuff here. And I was wearing a 3-piece suit. I was no closer, you know, from here to that wall. 3 or 4 meters away from him I was. I never approached him. I wasn't violent. I wasn't aggressive. I just raised my voice enough to be heard. And then when I read him his caution, he said to me, now, Mr. Carlin, and I looked at him and I says, is that your reply after caution? And at that point, he knew that I had legally arrested him as a police officer. I had brought in my powers as a constable under the office of constable, and I had made the decision to arrest him. If I was wrong, I was in trouble with my bosses. I fully stood over the commitment I made to that. So he stood up, and he's like 7'12". He's a big gangly guy, and he's like a giraffe. He took off out of the court, and he ran out of the court. And there's 2 security doors, 2 doors in and out of the court. The judge can go out either one of them, and so you don't only hit a green button that releases the magnetic lock. I thought maybe there was one green button, and it released both doors. So when he went to go in that door, I went over to the second door to see would it open too, but it wouldn't open. So,
you were following him to
arrest him?
So no,
to detain him?
No, at no time was I ever going to put hands on him. This man's got security guards. For a police officer to go in and put hands on someone of that stature is just, you know, is a big no-no. I didn't have any weapons on me. I was unarmed. I didn't have any police, apart from my police card. So all I was looking to do was to make him aware that he was under arrest, that I had invoked the office of constable, and he was duty bound to comply with, you know.
What was the next step there? What was you taking him to the police station?
No, I was never going to take any part in that there. So in the same way that wee guy that shot the guy that was arresting the place, he did what he had to do. Then uniformed police come, they take over. He's taken away, and then he has to get.
Do you have contacted active on duty police officers to come and intercept and issue your version?
I asked for someone to contact uniformed police to come to assist me with my unusual arrest. So the police were called, and it took them. I think I heard later on that they were all driving around Belfast city centre, and they were calling out on the radio asking for someone to go, and no one wanted to take the call. They were all freaking crapping themselves, like, you know. So eventually a call sign came, and when they came in, the sergeants I didn't know were outside talking to court staff and taking the judge's version of events. So when a police officer arrests someone, PACE legislation kicks in. The Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 kicks in, Article 26. And the arrested person must be taken to the nearest geographical custody suite, which was Musgrave Street Police Station, about 500 metres away. And so what I anticipated would happen was the judge would get into the car with his security, and he would be taken. I wouldn't be anywhere near him, and that I would be conveyed round or walked round to the police station. The only person in PACE who can decide whether an arrest was lawful or not lawful is the nearest geographical custody sergeant. So I have to present my case to her, as it turned out as a female, explain the circumstances of the arrest and why I arrested them and for what offences. And then the person themselves get to make their solicitor makes representations, and then the custody sergeant they deem whether it's a lawful arrest or not. So they can de-arrest them at that point, but no one else can de-arrest them. The chief constable can't tell me to de-arrest. There's no one, because the office of constable is an independent office, and with great power comes great responsibility. So no one can tell you to arrest or to de-arrest.
So what happened then?
So police came, and basically the police officers, two constables came in. They're very nice people. They came in and spoke to me, and I explained everything, the legislation, rhymed it all off, and he just pushed his hat up, so his tip of his hat was pointing up, and he's just scratching his head, and he says, look, I'm not trained in civil law. He says, everything you said sounds really plausible and believable, but he says, I don't understand that legislation. He says, we're waiting for the sergeants. So the sergeants came in, and they said, do you want to tell us what happened? So I started to explain to them, and I got like 2 seconds into it, and they says, right, let's take this outside. And I says, look, Sergeant, you were called at my request. I says, I've carried out an arrest, and you're here to assist me with that arrest. I says, the person that's arrested is behind that door, so I'm not leaving until the arrested person's been detained and been taken into custody. And they said, basically she nodded to the constable, and then he then arrested me for 2 counts of assault.
Assault?
Against the judge.
So your colleagues that you thought was coming to assist you,
they arrested me.
then put you in handcuffs?
Not contempt of court, no.
No, they arrested me. Police as a civil offence. So they arrested me for an assault ×2. So the judge felt that I had assaulted him because of my demeanour. I didn't physically touch him, but because he felt in fear for his safety. So that's a technical common assault. So he felt that he had been assaulted, which was nonsense. Okay. So can you imagine going down the street and trying to arrest some guy that's drunk and being loud, and when you speak to him to communicate that he's under arrest?
This had escalated.
You've assaulted me, yeah.
It's nonsense.
Can I ask you, and this was premeditated?
What's that?
The arrest on the judge?
No.
How? Well, then I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
You had a very, very clear understanding of the legislation, of the 5 charges that you were going to bring.
Yes.
I would say 0.001% of police officers will be anyway aware of that legislation. So the fact that you had your warrant card, you knew what you were going to do, you had an idea of what they would do, where he would go.
No, I didn't know any of that.
That doesn't sound like a spur of the moment.
No, what happened was, in the build up to that, I looked at 6 or 7 years of going in and out of the courts and seeing the behaviour of the judges and seeing what was going on, and I suspect that to use police.
But the ideas had to swirl in your head. If this goes that road, they're at this. This is fraud.
Because that's where my thinking would be. If I was getting in there and I'd be like,
because
right, if this goes against me, I feel like I'm right in this situation, and if this goes against me, I should go a different direction, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But that, what you're saying is that was a spur of the moment as such.
No, I'm not saying it was spur of the moment, right? So when I was doing my research and all through them 6 years, and I seen decisions constantly, it's almost like there's a judicial guarantee of success for the banks. So I couldn't comment on other people's cases, so I based it on mine that I knew inside out. So when I went in there and I had all the evidence backing it up, and all I was asking for was for a banker's book of evidence application, and that was a reasonable thing to do, and it would bring out the truth. For me, if the judge went against that and found in favour of the bank, yet again, in my opinion, he committed a criminal offence. But he's entitled to a trial, and he's entitled to all of that things. But for me, it was enough to justify arresting him.
So you were arrested? So you were taken out of court?
No, so just to explain, I did research and I thought, right, what would possible offences be? Mm-hmm. Do I think he could be committing a criminal offence if he did that there? If he did do it, what would they be? So I did research in that there so that I could weigh up in my mind both arguments in a fair and reasonable way. And
That's
so-
what I was saying. It does. You had researched it. There was
No, I
premeditation
definitely
to it.
had looked. So I look at people's behaviours, and then police officers are trained to convert those behaviours into offences and the definitions of those offences.
Yeah.
I say it's broken down in the AV7 video.
So then,
They are, yeah.
right, you've been arrested.
And I'm going into prison as a police officer. They were out in the yard, they were throwing up like empty Coke bottles and all at my window and fag butts and shouting, and they were going to stiff me, and came to the door and they threatened to kill me.
I'm going to be honest with you. I will be fucking shitting myself.